Gar Borras' Time Machine. Gar, this is episode 22, and we're talking today all about the adventures of Superman. And this was kind of Gar's idea, just to let people know. So we want to welcome you once again to our pop culture playground. That's a catchphrase that our rock star Gar Borras penned all on his own. Welcome once again, Gar. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Let's get this started. I mean, this is my childhood.
Yeah. Now let's just to let people know the time frame we're talking here. The Adventures of Superman aired from September 19th, Gar, 1952 to April 28th, 1958. And what's interesting about that, I mean, I was looking, I was doing some research, and this is, the 1950s is when TV kind of was just barely getting started. And the only real other kind of, TV show on at the time, they had many things, but probably that we'd even enjoy was Dragnet and I Love Lucy. So that's kind of a time period we're talking here.
Yes, and it's funny because when I was a kid and I was watching it, I just remember it in black and white.
Yeah.
And there were
color episodes.
A number of seasons that were done in color, and I just don't remember those.
Yeah, and I got a couple of the seasons on DVD when it first came out, and I'm kind of like you. I mean, what's kind of interesting is they actually had more seasons of the show in color than actually in black and white. I do not know why. The black and white kind of resonated with me. And when we were talking about doing the show a couple of weeks ago, you posted something online that just kind of it just brought back a lot of memories, because one of the things when I think of the Adventures of Superman and that TV show, I remember being a kid and almost saying it verbatim. I mean, the opening, where faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to reach tall buildings in a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman.
And it's so funny because that opening saying that you just repeated right there, lives on today.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I was reading the guy who did the voiceover for that only was paid $130 back in the day, and like I said, not just you and me, Gar, but how many people, when they think of the Adventures of Superman, that's the first thing they think of. I mean, they got off cheap back in the day,
Well, the show was really not a very high budget show.
Yeah.
And I remember when they would do the flying scenes.
Yeah.
With Superman, there were times that he was like laying on a table, and you could tell because his belly was flat.
Yeah, and
you're watching it, but as a kid, you're watching it, you don't care.
Yeah.
In your mind, he's flying.
Yeah, I mean, it's they didn't have great special effects back then. Another thing I was reading, eventually, George Reeves, who played the role of Clark Kent in Superman, he was a star of the show. He did during one of the flying scenes, and when they were trying to make it look like he was flying, he did fall, from the wire, and so after that, he refused to do it, and then they had to use other techniques to make it look like he was flying.
Or a stunt double.
Yeah.
But by today's standards, all of that is like very, very, archaic.
Prehistoric, yeah.
But at the time, that all of that was like cutting edge.
Yeah. And then,
and it was really, it was so, when you're a kid and you're watching the bullets bounce off of his chest, you're just, as a little boy, you're just like, your eyes, you're in awe.
And Gar, I might mention, in 2022, Superman, at least the Adventures of Superman, is celebrating its 70th anniversary, and that's quite a milestone, and the thing people got to realize is this is actually the first time that anybody ever had seen the character of Superman on film, and I mean, I should note that the character of Superman was created in 1938, and so it originated, of course, in the comic books, And then eventually Superman became so popular, before it was ever on TV, they did a radio broadcast of several Superman shows that I'm going to post some of these on our site when I post the episode we're doing today. But so that's the thing, is, start out in the comic books, then it moves on to the radio, which is, people are kind of listening. So by the time 1952 hits and the Adventures of Superman goes on TV, people are kind of really, for the first time, other than the comic books, getting a real sense of who Superman and Clark Kent are. Anybody who's read on the comic books kind of had an idea, but this is what they had to do. They had to kind of say, okay, how do we take Superman from the comic books? Then it was on radio. Now how are we going to put it on TV and make it believable?
Well, they did a good job.
Yeah,
because, just all of the kids, it was like super popular. By the time I was watching it as a child, and this is preschool, age for me.
Yeah.
When I remember watching it, it was already in reruns, and my parents were kind of introducing it to me, as a child, and you're watching him, you're watching him jump, into the air and start flying, and you're just like going, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
because
yeah.
at that time you just didn't see that.
Yeah.
It's hard for people to visualize now, because we've seen everything, and everything is so advanced, and
yeah,
but way back, when I was a kid, in like say the year 1960, that you just didn't see that.
Well, see,
so you really believed it, as a kid.
By the time you're seeing it for the first time, Gar, the show had been off the air at that point for 2 years already, and that's kind of very much the same story I had. I was not born until 1971, but I remember too as a kid seeing this show like in reruns. They would I would see this in reruns along with the Batman show we talked about in a past episode from the 1960s. And so I'm seeing these shows when they've been off the air, for a number of years for the first time, and that is kind of my introduction to kind of what Superman is. And then eventually in 1975 they would go on to do the first Superman movie with Christopher Reeve, and then you're kind of really seeing Superman colorized and in the 1970s, and it's kind of a new chapter of what Superman is. But yeah, we should also mention that The Adventures of Superman was an American television series that was based on comic book characters created by Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster, which they created in 1938. In 1992, they were both inducted into the comic book industry's Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame. And what's kind of interesting, these guys would go on to work at DC Comics. They sold the rights from when I was reading to DC Comics, but they felt that they got really kind of ripped off because they sold it for a ridiculous low price. But again, I guess just poor business decisions, unfortunately. But that's kind of who created Superman.
Well, in a way, hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
You wind up selling the rights, and then after you sell the rights, then you figure out that you really blew it. Well, that's on them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They didn't have to sell the rights for that. They made the decision. But it was just there was a lot of things about the show that are so different from say the Batman that came later in the 60s. There was a lot of a lot of violence, and then when a criminal in the first season, when criminals would reach their end, they would actually show in that first season of Superman of the villains dying, and not really realizing that, hey, wait a minute, this is for kids. You know what I mean? And I'm sure for little kids, they're it was a very different time, and and TV shows were working out their bugs too. You know what I mean? Because I think later on they wind up cutting down the violence and cutting down the deaths on the show and stuff like that,
for that,
and making it a lot more kid friendly. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's kind of interesting to look back now because you actually really see how people were learning, while they were actually doing.
Yeah, they did it for that very reason, like you said, because it started out as a kid show, and what they found very much like with the Batman show in the '60s was that it started out as a show being watched by kids, but the more episodes they do, more and more adults started to get into it because, I mean, it was much more than just Superman. They developed, like stories between the different characters and stuff. And like, even if you go back to you look at the history of Superman, like I said, Superman was created in 1938. So even if you look at the history of Superman in comic books, I mean, I remember reading stuff about, back in the 40s during World War II and that, they had stories about Superman, during wartime and what Superman meant to America and stuff like that. So Superman is always getting involved with different stuff like that over years. And then later in the show, they also had stories that were based on science fiction and stuff. And talking about kind of the writing and the comedy on the show. I mean, what I used to love is. I mean, almost in every episode you get a shot of George Reeves' face, and we're not supposed to know it's that Clark Kent is Superman because he's wearing his glasses. We're not supposed to be able to tell. But
I was fooled.
But then he takes off those glasses and he kind of winks at the screen to let you know, yeah, it's me.
The premise is just so.
It's so simple, but yet
by today's standards, you know what I mean? That's the best way to put it. When you look at it now, it's so corny, but back at that time, it worked. It
worked, yeah. It was beautiful for the times, and it's kind of corny to look at it now, but it was beautiful, like you said. The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves, was the first ever TV show to feature the comic book legend Superman. The filmmaking for the TV show began filming in 1951, the previous year before it actually started airing on TV, in California at RKO Studios, where the Andy Griffith Show would also be shot at later in 1960. The Adventures of Superman was sponsored by Kellogg cereal. And like I said, Gar, I've got a collection of the Superman series we're talking about on DVD, and it shows you some of these old Kellogg's commercial with the different Superman characters that appeared on back in the day because, again, Kellogg's cereal sponsored The Adventures of Superman. But they made a point that Lois Lane was not allowed to appear in any of the commercials with Superman because they did not. They thought it would be too suggestive. Lois Lane and Superman having breakfast together did not look right. I mean, the things they thought of back in the day,
Well, then again, gossip and rumors.
Yeah.
Back in those days were much more,
rampant. Yeah.
We look at things nowadays
way
in
different.
Today's terms, but back in the 1950s, rumors and gossip and all of that kind of stuff was like a really big deal. Social pressure and all of that kind of stuff was at an extremely high level. So when they talk about, you talk about it in today's standards, you kind of like scoff and laugh. But yeah, back in those days, that's exactly what would come to people's mind if they saw, Clark Kent and Lois Lane eating breakfast together. That actually was the suggestion of the scene.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So it's really hard to look at it in that context nowadays, but back in those days, that is the first thing that would come to people's minds.
Yeah, and I seen an interview with one of the guys that created Superman. I was doing research online this past week, and one of the guys that created Superman was saying he based Superman kind of on himself, that he was kind of this nerdy type grown up, and like girls didn't think much of him, and he was like, what if there was this character that everybody thinks he's not that cool and stuff, but then he has secretly got this other identity that he's real super strong and he can save the world and all this. He said that's kind of what I base Superman on. And so Clark Kent is kind of, you see Clark Kent in his glasses, and he's a mild-mannered reporter, and he doesn't look all that cool, but man, as Superman, he steals all the scenes. He does the right thing. He saves the day, as we said, and they're not too concerned during the show at the suggestion that that Superman and Lois Lane are together. I mean, we know it's Clark Kent, you know what I mean, and you can tell, although Clark may not come out and be so obvious to Lois Lane, you can tell as you're watching the show that he's just madly in love with Lois Lane.
Yes, and that was I think one of those really early TV show, always teasing the audience with this underlying, two people having feelings for each other, but nothing has been acted upon yet, and which as years go on, that became a staple for storylines for TV shows for many years to come.
I mean, probably the
Superman Lois Lane is like the first one in the history of TV.
It's a blueprint for it, and what's interesting is it very much kind of reminds me of Sam and Diane on Cheers,
Exactly, that's my point.
Yeah.
Exactly, that is a formula that got used as a staple for many years to come.
Yeah, and it ran for.
They discovered it with Superman, with the Adventures of Superman.
Yeah, and so just to also let people know, it ran for 6 seasons, a total of 104 episodes. The first 2 seasons of episodes were in black and white, and then the other 4 were in color. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and then when they started colorizing it, then they started introducing characters that villain characters.
Yeah.
Where in the black and white, they were just bad guys, criminals, gangsters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when it got colorized, then they started, and that really kind of formulated the bad guy caricatures for say the Batmans and all of these others, because Batman would be the main character, but Batman would be nothing if he didn't have bad guys that reoccurring bad guys that he would have to fight these criminals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the colorized versions of the Adventures of Superman really kind of created that format also.
Oh yeah, and it's important because even growing up myself, like being a Superman and Batman fan, I love the villains that you're talking about, Gar, just as much as I love the superhero. I mean, in reference to like Superman, Lex Luthor's probably the most famous one of his foes, but like Batman, though, they got all kinds of villains. They got the Joker, who's probably my favorite, the Penguin, the Riddler, Catwoman, and you see, you see that's why like the more they developed a lot of these characters, even more of a modern one would be Harley Quinn. Go girl power right there, but they got great villains, too, in these comic books.
They were doing like these unusual characters.
Yeah.
For bad guys. guys. They'd have like some, Professor Periwinkle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it just coming up with these characters for bad guys in the Superman series, and they were the beginnings of that.
Yeah, that Adventures of Superman. If you look, like, at first the bad guys he was fighting, they were gangsters, and some of them were science fiction stuff. But like, that's why Lex Luthor is a perfect villain for Superman. Because it's somewhat believable. Okay, this guy's supposed to be a crazy mad scientist. That's somewhat believable. Like with the Joker. Okay, supposedly he becomes a Joker because he gets burned and falls in this big bucket of acid, and it burns his face, becomes a clown or whatever. It's not as important. We believe it. It's just like, okay, we believe it because we want to, and that's why, but on a TV show like Superman, I think they had to make it somewhat believable. Okay, and that's why it's important to have, like, Clark Kent as alter ego. Okay, so what does this guy do when he's not Superman flying around, saving the world? It kind of gives it a balance.
Well, honestly, when I go through my memories,
yeah,
and I think about the show, the thing that I remember the most is that opening line.
You and me both, my friend.
Than a speeding train and all of that. I remember that opening thing more than the shows and everything. That's how important those words, when they were being spoken, as a kid, and you're sitting in front of the TV show, when they're saying those words, you're sitting in front of it as a kid in total anticipation.
Not just that, Gar. Okay, it was kind of like that with me with the Batman show, in the sense that, like I told you, when we did the episode on Batman, every week I'd watch it, I'd be like, I would be singing that song, na 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 na, Batman. But like you said with Superman, when we started talking about the idea to do today's show, that's the first thing I remembered. Not even Superman or any of the episodes, just I remember every time I would watch The Adventures of Superman as a kid, watching a rerun, I'd sit down in front of the screen, like you said, and I would say it line for line. I mean, like with a lot of these reruns that I watch over and over, like Three's Company and Happy Days, constantly, I know all the lines. I can say them before the actor even speaks them, but that was how I used to prep myself for Adventures of Superman. Faster than a speedboat, able to tall buildings, a single, I knew it word for word.
Yes. And while you're watching it and you're listening to that person say that, you're just like, oh my gosh, look, get on with the show. I can't wait. I gotta see. You know what I mean? It's just, it just, when they were saying that, it just, the juices start flowing as a kid. You're just like, you're into it, man.
And what's
you're
interesting,
just ready to watch Superman, do superhuman things and beating up the bad guys and saving everybody, saving the day. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just so, you look back now and it's so hokey, when you're watching him and doing all those things. But as a kid, I'm watching it and I'm just totally believing it.
And I was so into it's funny that you and me had that same experience. I'm sure we're not the only ones, but I'm sitting here, I found out the voiceover, the guy's name who did that, and we're going to get into that later, but why that is so important. I remember prepping myself for a show, getting ready to save a line, as a narrator saying it before I'm sitting down watching the show, and I don't know why at the time, maybe because I'm a young kid at the time, not only am I believing every word of that, but I love the opening because it says exactly what it is, in a few lines. And as a kid, I don't know, I think Superman, it's in Superman's voice, Superman's telling this is who I am. That's what I thought at the time. And like you said, then I watched the episode, and as a young kid, you're so into believing things. I mean, I had no doubt that the guy on the screen was Superman. I had no doubt that Superman could fly. I had no doubt that Superman was the hero. he was the one I was rooting for. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes. And at that time, because this was the only thing that was out on TV that was like superhero, all that. At the time, as a kid, I could never in my mind picture anyone else playing Superman other than George Reeves.
You and me both.
I remember that as a child.
You and me both. And what's interesting, while I had seen Superman in comic books before, I don't know why, but The Adventures of Superman with George Reeves, that is my reference, where my reference for Superman really began.
Well, of course, I come from an older generation, and the comic books, man.
Yeah.
As a kid, I just, I remember my mom, my sister, and I taking a train clear across the United States to go visit family, because my mom was from Georgia. We lived in Southern California, but my mom's family lived in Georgia, and so we took the train, and it took about a week to take a train from California to Georgia.
Wow.
And it's a long,
yeah.
You have to go through, it doesn't go straight from Southern California through Texas and the Southern straight over to Georgia. You had to go through some of the northern states and Wyoming and all of that stuff. But as a child, that the thing that kept me sane were superhero comics. I had a bunch of them. I had the Wolverine. I had Batman. I had
Spider-Man.
Superman, and all of that stuff was just without those comic books, I probably would have my mom probably would have ended me. You know what I mean? Because I would have been just bouncing up and down and being completely out of control.
Oh yeah.
On a train. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you keep a little preschool kid occupied?
Yeah. In fact,
during that. But yeah, I mean, it was. All I could say is, I don't think that I was, I think I was the norm for kids at that time. You just, those comic books were a big deal to you as a child.
Oh yeah, and it's amazing, Gar. All these years later, we're talking in 2022. Comic books themselves and comic book memorabilia. It's amazing what it has become worth, and I still love to look at comic books and stuff. But I'll tell you a little bit how the times have changed since then, Gar. Is today, if somebody was like as I was doing research, I find like you can find old episodes of The Adventures of Superman on YouTube and that, and the modern day mother, what they might do is say, okay, you want to watch Superman? Get out. I'll let you watch my phone. Watch old Adventures of Superman on YouTube, and they entertain the kid that way, But it's there. It's still there.
Yeah, but I just know that my grandkids, if I tried to show them that, they just like, oh God, get this away from me. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to kill me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they're just, everything is so advanced nowadays. They kids look at that stuff as like, yuck. But me as a kid, oh my gosh, I was in heaven. And I just remember watching The Adventures of Superman. I remember being in front of that TV, can't wait for it to come on.
Yeah.
And I just remember that as soon as they start saying those words, faster than a speeding train.
More powerful than a locomotive, able to reach tall buildings.
I was just, I was ready. Take me away, Superman. Yeah,
and Gar, it's funny you say that too about your grandkids, because I'll just send you an old clip of what I'm talking about so you can kind of see for yourself. But I was doing research for something on Batman once, and there are these old, like from the 1940s, like theater shorts they used to play before some of the movies of Batman, what Batman and Robin used to look like, and I'm not just it is not my Batman. I mean, it was black and white first of all, and it looked like Batman was like a gay superhero. You just have to see it to know what I'm talking about. And
well, I think in those old Batmans that you're talking about, for him to get somewhere, he would have to get in a car.
Yeah, and it looked. They didn't have anything like the Batmobile. It just. But then I enjoy looking at stuff like that. Okay, because it's interesting. Okay, gotta understand. It starts from somewhere, But like even for Batman, you have to go all the way back to 1943 to the first time we're seeing Batman on the TV screen. And even as campy as the 1960s show was, I think they had perfected Batman at that point. And it's interesting because that is my reference point for Batman is Adam West.
Well, yes, absolutely. Just like George Reeves. I mean, back in those days, you could not picture anyone other. And Adam West, he was, he embraced it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even though I'm sure he suffered the same frustrations that George Reeves did of being typecast,
I mean, he did. I mean,
being typecast with Batman, he embraced it and just enjoyed this celebrity for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
doing these Comic-Con types of things and all of that stuff, and they were among the kids. They were rock stars.
Oh yeah, so true. And getting back to the Adventures of Superman, like I was saying, the star of the show was indeed George Reeves in the role of Clark Kent and Superman. And you're talking a little bit about him, having a problem. Like first, he didn't want to accept the role. He eventually did accept the role and tried to get out of it a couple times because he feared of being typecast. Now, you laugh at that, but like I was reading before he was ever in Superman, he was actually in Gone with the Wind, which is now a legendary, motion picture. But and so he was a serious actor. But now when we think of him, Superman is what we think of. But that's not a bad thing in my eyes.
No, but at that time, see, I'm sure he couldn't look at it in perspective. He was only looking at it as the here and now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not looking at it as legacy. He's not looking at it, because nobody had created a Hall of Fame for this or Hall of Fame for that, and nobody knew how legacies would play parts in all of this and all of that stuff. He was just looking at it as the here and now. Superman is over. I can't get work. Nobody will take me seriously as anything other than Superman.
Yeah, and part of that too, Gar, has to do with the fact that, like you said, even people on TV, like, they were, let's say, on Superman, they had no idea anything about TV shows having legacies or anything. I mean, these were one of the very first TV shows to ever kind of be on the air. So they were kind of, people 70 years later can look back and say, oh yeah, you look back, 1952 when Superman came on TV, the special effects were really kind of, really nothing like they are today. But again, you got to look at it from a historical point of view that, okay, it's one of the first TV shows, ever. And yeah, it was done in black and white and things are done different now. But it's got a lot of, historical value for all kinds of reasons.
You got that straight, man.
Yeah.
Historical for a lot of reasons. But then none of that was going through his head.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I did a little bit of digging into, because, as far as I knew at that time when I was a kid, my parents told me, You know, I was a little kid.
Yeah.
My parents, they didn't thinking twice about telling somebody, a little kid about somebody taking their own life. Because they told me, yeah, he committed suicide.
But
he killed himself. But in doing the research now, I'm very skeptical that he actually killed himself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, by today's standards, there's a lot of question marks. I think the number one question mark was that there were no fingerprints on the gun. That's very suspicious. How do you kill yourself?
Yeah.
Shooting yourself in the head with a gun and not leave any fingerprints on the gun.
Yeah, and you know
what I mean. So that right there is not a little bit suspicious. That's extremely suspicious.
Yeah, and I came across a report, something that hinted that he had an affair with some guy's wife or fiance.
A very powerful person's wife.
Yeah. And they think he might have...
A very powerful person's wife, that powerful person had ties to organized crime.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? Even talking about if it was a suicide, what's interesting is back in the 50s, suicide wasn't as widely reported as it is today, or even it's kind of interesting. Everything I came across about George Reeves' death, while it hinted at suicide, a lot of reports did not kind of just come out and say it. They might have hinted at it. Like I read something where it said, the cast of Superman, they were shocked and saddened by his, shocking, sad death. They didn't say how he died. Just kind of, they were shocked and sad, and it didn't really go into details. Maybe back then in the 50s, not only was it not discussed a lot, but maybe they thought, well, people don't want to know Superman killed himself, or something kind of crazy like that.
Well, yeah, but but it's so trippy. I'm sure, they were trying to control the damage of the dark cloud of suicide.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're trying to put their spins. They got their spin doctors and all that kind of stuff. But my parents, that they were just very, that was the thing that and I carried that with me for all of my life. I thought he committed suicide. My parents told me he did it because he couldn't get any other parts in movies or TV shows because nobody could get past the fact that he played Superman and they only saw him as Superman.
Yeah, and
and that frustrated him, so he committed suicide. That's what I thought, and that's what I thought all my life until I did the research for this
episode.
This episode, about the adventures of Superman.
Yeah.
So, but now I'm, honestly, I don't think that they'll ever. It will always remain a mystery. But yeah, I am very, very suspicious now about his death.
Yeah,
I really, I think it was not a suicide. I think, and then there was another thing that I did, because when I did the research, they actually put out the address of the place that he actually committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
The dark side of myself.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know if it's the same house, but there is still a house and there is that same address that exists today.
Yeah, and I don't have it in front of me, but also online I was able to find the name of the cemetery where he's buried. So if anybody's interested, I guess they can find that online. And just to kind of give people a little more of a backstory of Adventures of Superman and talk about the writing and some of the storylines, Clark Kent was a reporter at the Daily Planet newspaper, which was based in the fictional city of Metropolis. Clark's two colleagues at the Daily Planet were Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane, who always found themselves in dangerous situations that only Superman could always save them from in a timely manner. So again, any episode we're talking about, these two people would always find them in trouble. Of course, Clark Kent, aka Superman, would always save these two people. And
but then the whole thing running through the whole thing was that Lois Lane suspected that Clark Kent was Superman. But she was always looking for proof, and she could never get it.
Yeah, and then to further talk about kind of some of the backstory of the show, in The Adventures of Superman, Lois Lane stars as a fellow reporter who was always trying to outscoop Clark Kent. And you see that in kind of some of the early episodes, but eventually becomes his love interest, and that becomes a big part of the TV show.
Which also had to do with the older age audience, because the kind of by accident they discovered that not only kids were watching it, but adults were watching it too. So when you interject that element into the storyline, that satisfies the older audience. Which was a very smart move on their part.
Yeah, and here's an interesting little tidbit of trivia I found. The show's opening theme, which is known as the Superman March, I'm talking about the music now, was composed by Leon Klatskin, who also arranged music for 84 episodes of Gunsmoke, as well as being the music arranger on 42 episodes of Rawhide. And Leon Klatskin died on May 13th, 1992. Now, I mentioned this because just, again, an interesting little, I wonder who created the Superman theme, Okay, that's the guy. And the other thing I found interesting that we found in a lot of our past episodes, talking about some of the classic TV shows, is that a lot of these guys that, arranged the music did not just do it for one TV show. They they worked for many studios within Hollywood, and they would maybe arrange music for more than one TV show back in the day.
Well, it's like stock stuff that they had that they could reuse for this and reuse for that and stuff like that, and that's their way to save money. You know what I mean? There was a number of things that they were doing on the set that were kind of like first times where they would use the same set for this as they would use the same set for that. You know what I mean? And then they would interchange those sets with different TV shows.
Yeah, and here's something, talk a little bit about the flying stuff that you're talking. In early episodes of Adventures of Superman, wire work was used to capture the flying scenes, but on one occasion, the support wires snapped, causing George Reeves to drop to the floor. After this took place, George Reeves refused to do any more wire work. That is why in the earlier episodes shows Superman taking off in flight within the frame, but in later episodes he would run towards the camera and hit a hidden springboard and leap out of the frame to make you think he was flying, like you said.
It worked.
Yeah.
It worked, and I just another part of it that I remember to this day. The audio of the wind, the sound of the wind when he was flying, was another stock thing that they would, when you watched like another TV show or another movie, when it was like gale force winds or hurricane force winds, you would hear that wind sound.
Oh yeah.
And it was such a the sound of that wind was the same sound every time he would be flying.
Oh yeah,
in an episode. they would use that same wind sound, and it was so stock and so predictable and so been there, done that. But as a kid, man, I still remember that to this day.
Yeah, and another thing,
sound of the wind.
When I think back to the Superman, the three things that stand out to me was, like I said, the scenes where George Reeves would kind of remove his glasses and wink at the screen, let us know he's Superman. The opening would be number one, like we discussed, and then in the scenes where Clark Kent would have to go save Lois Lane or somebody, and he'd all of a sudden run like to a phone booth and change out of his regular clothes and throws his glasses and his hat down and gets into Superman uniform, and we never see what happens to his clothes. He just kind of disappears. But that's another thing that it's not really explained, but we just kind of accept it.
Well, but think about this. I mean, that was a normal, stable part of the show.
Yeah.
Running into a phone booth to change.
Yeah.
Phone booths don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, you're right. Dead on about that.
So, the time, it was just like a staple for the show, and then there's another thing about TV shows from that time period. It was a very common thing.
Yeah.
When they would end the TV show, and every episode of Super Bowl would end with somebody telling a joke, and then everybody laughing, and then the camera fading out.
Oh, yeah.
But it was always ended like that, with somebody telling a joke and everybody laughing, and then they would, that was the end of the show.
Yeah, and then I was reading that after the death of actor George Reeves, producers considered continuing the series with Jimmy Olsen becoming the main character, but actor Jack Larson, who played Jimmy Olsen, rejected the idea. And what's interesting is, I guess at the time George Reeves died, the show had just been picked up for another season, but then they have to make a decision. Are we going to carry on with somebody else? I think ultimately they made the right decision, because like you said, two things with that. I, at that point, and even today, I don't see who they could have possibly got, to play the part of Superman. And then how do you explain, okay, we're going to have Jimmy Olsen become the main character on the show, and he's all of a sudden going to be Superman? I just do not think it would have worked.
Well, we talk about this in a lot of different episodes, of this podcast, where the people behind the desk trying to make creative decisions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, obviously the people that really did have a clue about making creative decisions overrode whoever the person that's got no business making creative decisions.
Yeah.
There are creative people, and there are people that are not creative, but their strong suit is in other areas, in running the business side of things. But and that's obviously the people with the vision prevailed on that one.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of times that the true creative minds get overridden by the people that really have no business making creative decisions.
Yeah.
And usually when the people that have no business making creative decisions, it winds up that becomes the death blow to whatever they're trying to extend the life of.
Yeah, that's like very much. I was watching this video online talking about Three's Company, which we have an episode on. People can check that out. But I bring that up because as Three's Company, kind of like with Seinfeld, they had a great ensemble cast, and that's why the show was so popular. In retrospect, and then they thought, you know what, John Ritter is the star of the show, so you know what, we're going to get rid of all these other actors. We're going to give him his own show. It's going to still be, based on the character of Jack Tripper, but we're going to put him with another group of people, and because he's the star of a show, people will continue to watch it. What they found is when they did that it only lasted for one season. And they talk to people later, years later, and they find out, oh, well, yeah, we loved Jack Tripper, but we loved him, living in the apartment with the two girls and his best friend Larry and the Ropers and Mr. Furley. Just all those people together made it, it was the whole package, if you will.
Yes. It was the whole package.
And Gar, I think I found a perfect way to wrap up this episode. So if you give me a few minutes to do this, because I wrote it out in its entirety. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's Superman. Yes, it's Superman, strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. Superman who can change the course of mighty rivers, can bend steel in his bare hands, and who, disguised as Clark Kent, multi-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan, fights for truth, never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hey, man, I was getting goosebumps there, brother.
Yeah. Well, Gar, once again, we've wrapped up another wonderful episode, and thanks for coming up with the idea to do this. When we do this again in 2 weeks, just to let people know, we will be talking about American Bandstand. Now, that's going to be a fun one because it's not just TV, but it's music related, so we're going to have so much to talk about.
Oh, I have so much to contribute to that one.
And next time we talk, Gar, I'm also going to have to see, because you have a show coming up at Santa Fe Springs, Swap Me next weekend, so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well.
We can talk about little old me too.
Well, like I said, you are the rock star of our pop culture playground. So thanks for being a part of the show, Gar. Take care.
Chaotic Drift Magazine.